That sounds good. Oh, you're recording. I'm just trying, sorry.
Okay, we'll make a start and we'll let other people in as and when they arrive, because despite the fact that we've only got one speaker this morning, I think we're going to have quite a full-on session actually. There's lots going on in the landscape as always. There'll be plenty for us to talk about, and me and Chris always like to talk about the changes that are happening, don't we, Chris? Here comes Kevin, so he obviously couldn't hear us and has gone out and come back in again, so that's good. Okay, good. It says that Kevin's connecting to audio. Can you hear us this time, Kevin? It looks like he's struggling, doesn't it? Okay, we'll make a start with introductions and he can introduce himself when he's here. Can you hear us, Kevin?
No, not working.
Doesn't look like it, does it? Okay.
I don't see him either.
Can you not see him? I can see him. Depends on how many people your Zoom screen will be set up to show.
True.
If it's 9, he might be on the next screen on his own.
Deborah, can you hear me now?
I can hear you now. Hooray. I saw you go out and come back in again.
It's ridiculous.
So you're all right now?
Well, it's about clicking buttons that I've not trained. Waste of time. Sorry about that, everyone.
But you're with us now, Kevin, and that's what matters. So that's great.
Well, it's good to be here. Thank you all.
You're welcome. Okay, I'm just going to zoom around the Zoom screen and let everybody introduce themselves. I think I've met pretty much everybody on the call. I'm not sure I've met Claire, but that might be because I can't see her yet, so I haven't had my brain reminded of things. If you haven't met me before, my name's Deb Outhwaite. I'm incoming BELMAS chair this summer, which we're looking forward to. So lots of things that me and Nick and Ryan, and it's actually Nick, it says Ryan on the executive officer Zoom here, but it's actually Nick who's with us from the office, because very happily Ryan's partner had a baby girl on Saturday morning. So we've all been sent lovely new baby photos this weekend. So that's great. We're really happy for them. So Nick's joining us to record this morning. And I have been convening the LPD, Leadership Preparation and Development Research Interest Group, since 2015. I do have other things on. I'm not abandoning the RIG at any point, but if anybody else wants to have a go at co-convening with us, you know, you're very welcome to join us in the steering group. Mainly involves me and Pauline chucking emails backwards and forwards every now and again about holding events, and then any publications that come out of events. And Nick's doing a great job with the research interest groups at the moment, getting things up to date post-COVID really, and changing the way in which we move forward, which is part of our wider membership offer for BELMAS. So we're really excited about that. So enough from me. Pauline, you can go next.
Hi, good morning, everyone. I'm Pauline Yance. I'm Deb's co-convener with RIG, but definitely the inferior partner of the two. I think Deb does all the work. I turn up and talk. So I'm a teacher in Harrogate. Previously, I was a head teacher and also was involved in the leadership and development of new head teachers. So when I moved to the UK, I stalked Deb at the BELMAS conference, and here we are. So it's lovely to see you all, and I'm very excited to have our conversation today. Thank you for being here.
And tell everybody where you got your EdD from and how long ago it was.
It's actually right here. It's the first time I've had it on my wall. I just happen to have it beside me. I got my EdD at the George Washington University in Washington, DC, and I'm going to read the date because it's been so long ago now, 2016.
There we go. So yeah, so great to have Pauline with us as always. She is underplaying her role in the RIG.
Thank
you.
Really
important that we have full-time practitioners in that process and we know what's going on the ground as well. Liz, I might come to you last so that then we can do introductions before things. Chris, have a go.
Hi, yeah, my name's Chris Baker. I am the leader of professional development for a multi-academy trust in the southwest of England. 23 schools, kind of primary, secondary, special. My kind of day-to-day job, I guess, is trying to ensure that the PD that happens within the academies is of a good value. That's sometimes a little bit fluffy and doesn't bring any money in. So I get pimped out to do the ECT programs and the NPQ programs as well to actually pay my wages. I dragged myself to an EdD more recently than Pauline, in educational leadership, which is hence the membership here. And BELMAS was lovely enough only last week to publish a blog on the BELMAS blog. So
I saw it actually. It was
I
very
did too. Nice putting a
interesting.
name face to a name.
hopelessly devoted to BELMAS now.
Good. We need more of that. We've got an interesting kind of, because we've let our first year free membership wane, decided we weren't getting much kind of follow through from it. We need to kind of pull people in and explain why being a BELMAS member is good for people. So I'm really happy if anybody wants to talk to me about that and the different ways in which we can do that moving forward. Tom, this is the first LPD RIG meeting I think you've been to, so over to you.
Thanks. So I describe my interests as being around research informed policy and practice. I'm a bit of a research methods nerd. I teach all the research methods postgraduates at the Department of Education Studies at Warwick. I used to lead master's educational leadership programs at Birmingham. Again, I was a kind of, this is how you can do research. Here's how you can engage with research. Here's how you can use research. It's about a kind of research methods thing. One of the things that connects me to leadership quite a lot at the moment is I'm working on a research program with Toby Greeny and Pat Thompson on sustainable school leadership. So again, I've got a bit of research methods angle to this, and I'll be jumping into a lot of the admin data sets about what the composition of school leadership workforce looks like across the UK. And I know BELMAS has done some great work on this only recently, so we're hoping to build on some of that too.
Brilliant, and great to have you. So Ron Glatter, our BELMAS immediate past president, came to a session that you did before Christmas, spoke very highly of it and said, why is this person not in BELMAS? So I'm very pleased to see that you have made your own way in. That's what we need. Kevin, over to you.
Right, well, I'm still getting over Chris saying he gets pimped out. No, nobody picked up on that, and I will be using that. Probably getting myself in serious trouble. I'm at the University of Nottingham, and I know a number of the people. I know both people Tom referred to, and I'm working with Toby, second supervising. I teach on master's degrees part-time and distance learning and full-time, and unfortunately, I'm running a module with 180 students on it at the moment, and it's just done my head in. But I'm also chair of the post-16 RIG, which has had a reasonably successful year and a bit. And we're about to go with another session in June on leading with empathy, which I feel is very timely. So I'm just trying to pin down a couple of tame college principles. One I've got lined up already, and another one I'm trying to get at the moment. So I wanted to come along today. I didn't know you'd be here, Deborah. Forgive me, I'd forgotten you were leading this one. But the topic of professionalism and professionalism in FE was something that we just had 3 sessions on, and I wanted to continue my interest in listening to and engaging with you all. So it's good to be here. I will now be depimped.
But actually, when I heard Chris say that, it reminds me of how valuable it is for us to have system leaders who are involved in NPQ delivery to these meetings. So I'm looking forward to the conversation that takes place, Chris, between you and Liz, because I think that whole kind of being in the system and doing that delivery partner role gives us an additional insight actually as a group. It's great that we have people who, you know, are part of it at the academic end, but that delivery partner end I think is really valuable. Christian, over to you.
Good morning, I'm Christian Sood. I'm a senior lecturer at Nottingham Trent University. I've been there for 14 years, and I've been very lucky to know Deb since then as well. I remember, Deb, do you remember when I got the best award for MIE paper back in the day? And she joined us at this round table sort of just before dinner, and she never stopped talking, and she still doesn't stop talking now. Sorry about that. So there you are. That's the fame to claim with me and Deb's. Anyway, my interest is in education leadership, and I've done a lot of work in publication in the issues of EAL. And now I'm currently at Nottingham Trent EDI champion, whatever that means. The bosses says, well, you are a champion, now go and develop an action plan and see what happens. It's all about impact, impact and impact. Anyway, that's famous claim. And many, many years ago, I used to be the secretary for BELMAS. I did such a bad job and got chucked out. So never mind. I shall come back to haunt you later on, Debbie. So I may just put my hat in the ring for co-convener for this group.
Yeah, that would be great, Christian. We'd love to have you. And there are other, just while we're on the topic of other roles, there are what we now don't refer to as BELMAS council roles. We always used to refer to them as BELMAS council roles. There are roles on the BELMAS board up for grabs this summer. Self-nomination, so if any of you want to put yourselves forward to stand as on the trust board, you'd be very welcome. We meet 4 times a year. We have 2 virtual meetings and 2 physical meetings. So we meet before conference on the Friday before conference, and we meet on the strategy away day that's at the beginning of December. But apart from that, it's a 4 times a year commitment, and then of course playing that active role as governance for the society. So I am looking for more people to stand for that for this summer, because I think that would be great if we have more members playing a more active role. The roles also, Christian, you'll be pleased to hear, because we're hoping to move to a charitable incorporated organisation next January, so a CIO status, and moving away from being a charity with a limited company, so we don't have 2 lots of reporting lines to do. That all of those roles, secretary and treasurer and everything, effectively are going. We're not going to meet as a separate executive group any longer, because I don't think it's very good actually for the transparency of the board and the way the board behaves. So, you know, if Chris James were on here now, I'm hoping he'd be clapping at all of those changes. So we're trying to make things much more upfront so that everybody can see what it is we do and why we do it. So anybody who wants to help with that work would be really, really welcome. Now, Claire hasn't got her camera or sound on, and I was going to ask her to introduce herself next. It may be, as with a lot of people in the system, she is double participating in other things at the same time, or she may be on her way.
I'm here.
in. Hello.
Can you hear me?
I can hear you fine. Would you just like to introduce yourself,
Yeah,
Claire?
I will. Yeah, my camera's on, but for some reason it's not working. I don't know why, but I'll keep fiddling with it.
Don't worry.
It's on. Yeah, so my name's Claire Indans, and I work for Dear Apprenticeships, which is an independent training provider. We're located in the East Midlands, in Farnsfield, between Newark and Mansfield. My role there is I'm curriculum and delivery manager. Did my ED in 2017, or finished it in 2017, and my thesis was on marketisation of education. I'm interested in leadership in FE and researching within FE, and also writing and publishing, which I'm not that experienced at, but that's something I'd like to move into, and doing blog writing and the like. So yeah.
Yeah, happy to, I mean, a conversation with Chris actually might work well for you, Claire, as Chris has just had his blog published, but we're happy to have separate conversations about that. We've done various special editions of MIE and things from this RIG over the years, so we're interested in what publications come out of things, so we can talk about that at the end again before we finish.
Yeah, lovely.
Brilliant. And I think you have been to something before, haven't you?
Yes, I have.
My memory jogged now, because you're the other side of the East Midlands to me.
Yes.
So nice for you to be with us. Thanks. Great. Suzanne.
Hi, nice to see you all. Finally, a RIG meeting. I have been looking forward to it. I'm from Sweden, working at Mid Sweden University. I'm a senior lecturer in education. I'm also the director for our National School Leadership Training Program, as well as leadership preparation and development for aspiring principals, and the continuous professional development for more experienced principals. Trying to narrowing my research interests. So my PhD thesis was about principal leadership practices in collaborative partnerships, working with external partners for school improvement. But lately I've been focusing more on leadership preparation and development, and working with Tony Bush, who's our visiting professor for the 3rd year. We're writing a few articles about anticipatory socialization and identity formation for aspiring principals in Sweden. And we're also writing a research proposal on principal turnover in Sweden.
Which is nowhere near as high, of course, as our principal turnover or our head teacher turnover or our head of school turnover here. And I'm going to try and get through this morning without mentioning the O word. Thank you, Suzanne. Over to you, Mark. Oh, that's not like Mark. Mark's normally very quick enough. I tell you what, we'll come to Judy while you're trying to unmute. Ah, Claire, we can see you. Hello. Hi, Judy. Do you just want to introduce yourself?
Yes, hi everyone. I'm Judy Chandra. I work at the Open University. I'm the programme lead for the Masters in Education and Masters in Childhood and Youth. I have an interest in leadership preparation and development through a few different strands, really. One is because a number of our students are in school leadership as well as other forms of educational settings. And also I'm on a governing board of an upper school and a trust on the trust board as well, and work quite closely with the leadership within the school. I do have a secondary school teaching background, so my heart is still very much attached to schools. And my EdD, which I'm writing up at the moment, the thesis is related to educational leadership, but specifically higher education leadership. Nice to meet you all.
Great that you can be here. And I think Judy is thinking about helping co-convene one of our other rigs. Don't want to put you on the spot, but I think you're thinking about that, aren't you? Which would be fabulous. So really pleased that you're with us this morning. And Mark, you've got sound, or we can hear you.
I have.
Brilliant.
Sorry about that. I just recently migrated from PC to Mac, and I'm unlearning things. Negative transfer of learning, I think the psychologists refer to it as. Okay, yeah, I'm Mark Gibson. I'm senior lecturer at Oxford Brookes University in the School of Ed, but sort of exclusively really on leadership. I'm a pathway leader for the MA that we do on leadership management, and also work on our EdD programme and supervise PhDs too. Basically, I'm very interested and have been for some time in LPD. I also have an interest in structural reform, and anyone who would be interested in joining our structural reform rig, he said, advertising it, is very, which I co-host, is very welcome to come to that. And I also have an interest of leadership of international schools, which I developed a bit more about from my time when I worked at the branch campus of Nottingham, University of Nottingham, but situated in Malaysia. Thank you.
I'm just thinking out loud, really. This will not surprise you, for those of you who know me, but our overlap from this rig to other rigs is huge, isn't it? Occasionally, if I go to the gender and education leadership rig, it's all gender and education leadership rig people, whereas actually we've got somebody who's interested in the doctoral rig, somebody who co-convenes the structural reform rig, somebody who co-convenes the post-16 FE rig. And so we've got lots and lots and lots of overlaps. So it's all really interesting. Just so that you know, because of the focus of today's meeting, looking at the new NPQEYL that Liz will come on to in a second, I've also had lots of emails from people who work in early years, checking that we were recording this, who are going to be busy zooming through this bit if Nick doesn't edit it for us before it goes onto the website. Because they were really keen to attend and are all either teaching or at work this morning, so couldn't physically attend. And I've had about 12 emails like that, so just so that you're all aware. So I was really encouraged actually by the participation from people in early years and early years leadership as well. So that's great. So last but not least, deliberately last, in fact, Liz.
Hello, everyone. So I'm Liz Bullough. I'm a lecturer in early years and primary education, although an early years specialist at the Institute of Education. I work on the MA Early Years programme as module leader. I've also, historically, I led the validation for the early years initial teacher training at the IOE. And more recently, I've been working with my colleague, Dr. Amanda Ince, in developing the NPQEYL. Surprisingly, my PhD is related not to leadership, but to social theory and education, which is the intergenerational transfer of advantage with families and children. And there are some overlaps there, obviously. Historically, I was quite late to go into academia. So I spent 25 years plus in early years leadership in inner city Bristol. So, so that's how my sort of crossover comes. So yes, I'm going to be talking to you today about how we've been developing the NPQEYL, and I'm looking forward to discussion as well, especially as I know some of you are involved in delivery as well. What else was I going to say? I've also done quite a lot of international work. I started my time at the IOE in initial teacher education, particularly working with Teach First, but I've also done a lot of work in Jordan, setting up early grades initial teacher education program in Queen Rania Academy there. And it was lovely to see Suzanne here today. Suzanne, I hope you don't mind, I'm going to take your name in vain in one of the slides, because I've never met Suzanne, but we've been in contact because we're developing a paper with Amanda to hopefully present and publish. So it's lovely to see you, Suzanne, today. And I hope you don't mind, I've used your name in vain on one of the slides.
She won't mind that at all. And just so that you know, Amanda Ince was supposed to be joining us today to do a joint presentation with Liz, but she's poorly. So we're very pleased that Liz is here, and there will be other opportunities, I'm sure, for Amanda to come and talk to us, particularly given the interest we've had from early years practitioners and early years leaders. So I'm just going to start us off very quickly for a sort of quick overview, really, before I hand over to Liz. So as I said, we're looking this morning at the new National Professional Qualification for Early Years Leadership. So we've done our introduction, so that's great. And we've talked about the BELMAS LPD co-convener. So we've done historically from this RIG, we've done research with different parts of the world, and I myself have got EdD students in other parts of the world, as you can see there, but my day job has been very closely associated with LPD over the years, and people often say, LPD, what is that? I haven't heard across that acronym, but I know that we don't need this for the people that are on this slide that are joining us on the Zoom today. But if you're watching this, this is the sort of distinction really between leadership preparation and leadership development. And we often make this mistake that teaching and leadership are separate, but of course those of us who've held school leadership roles, and I am, you know, in my current post, I was a teaching school director, so still hold a role very closely allied to schools, so we know that they're separate, but in fact often joint activities. So in the English context, which is the context we're specifically looking at today, we know that our principal, our head teacher, our executive head teacher, our chief executive officer of trusts, and Chris gave us a good example of one of the school trusts in his introduction there. We know that that role is evolving. We know leadership at all phases has expanded and is still expanding. And we know that schools as places of learning are always evolving. Our society is always changing, but we have had significant challenges, which we're all well aware of from the last few years. And preparation benefits link very closely to recruitment and retention. And of course, if Tony were here, he would very much be telling us that research shows that effective development makes a difference in schools. So that's the academic background, but the practical background is about the fact that most principals, there are the odd exception now, particularly of trust chief executive officers, but the background for most principals, most head teachers, most heads of schools begin their careers as teachers. Middle leadership often doesn't have any reduced hours in an English context these days, and senior leaders may have teaching and leadership roles. Sometimes the teaching's abated. We do have a system that has a recruitment crisis at the moment, so lots of leaders are picking up last-minute teaching duties from elsewhere. And although principals often do little or no teaching, because of that expansion of leadership roles, their work is very much about relaying messages from one part of the system to the other, and those roles are huge now. So I work with a couple of heads who still have teaching commitments, and I am astounded when I meet them that they're managing to make those teaching commitments really in the role that they hold. So we've heard from Chris already about exec heads being responsible for groups of schools, and usually called chief executive officers these days being responsible for school trusts, which we now is the terminology we now use, but they are referred to in the literature previously as multi-academy trusts. So we're focusing really this morning on the English golden threads, and Liz will come back to this in her presentation. So these were announced back in 2019. They came into effect in September 21. The system delivered not explicitly any longer by higher education institutions. So for those of you who are not aware, national professional qualifications used to be licensed to universities, and that ended in 2016. So UCL, and Liz can talk a bit more about this, UCL is unusual in the 9 delivery partners by having a role from an HEI background in that. So there are other third sector organisations involved in this area now, charities, not-for-profit, but, and Liz can shed some more light on this morning, the system is largely pre-written. So although there are elements of flexibility, these organisations are delivery partners. And as I said, it will be really interesting to hear Chris's view when he's involved in that actual delivery this morning. So the golden threads are recruitment through initial teacher training. You'll notice it doesn't say teacher training and education. You know, those of us who come from teacher education backgrounds like the term ITTE on the end. There's a lot of sort of background for the reasons why for that. And then we move on to the early career framework. So for our ECTs are early career teachers in the system, and now they're for 2 years as opposed to the 1 year that NQTs used to have when they were newly qualified. They used to be newly qualified for a year with a 10% reduction in timetable. They're now early career teachers for the first year with a 10% reduction in timetable and a mentor, and the second year has a mentor for that second year and a 5% reduction in timetable for the mentor meetings. You know, that's putting huge pressure on the system at the moment. I'm working with lots of schools. We do a lot of teacher placements, and schools are saying to me, we either can't employ an ECT in this area, or we can't now take a beginner teacher from you from the PGCE or the BEd MEd programs, because we haven't got enough mentors, we haven't got the capacity as a school to do that. I live in the other side of the East Midlands from Clare. We back out onto the Peak District. We've got a huge number of small schools, and there is no capacity for mentoring in those schools beyond, beyond the basics. So, there are huge issues going on there. And we've kept the term appropriate body underneath the early career framework. The appropriate bodies used to be provided by teaching schools. So I ran an appropriate body for a few years, and local authorities. From next September, appropriate bodies will only be run by the new teaching school hubs. So for the last 2 years since this changes came into effect, we've had a dual system where appropriate bodies will run by local authorities and teaching school hubs. Now, many of these teaching school hubs have never run appropriate bodies before. They are taking a very different approach to the way in which the old teaching school alliances used to take in accrediting teachers. We used to put as an alliance an incredible amount of time and one-to-one effort on supporting people. What I hear on the ground across the country from different places is that that is not happening now because of the scale of those appropriate bodies. And when the teaching school hub contract gets renewed, local authorities will no longer play a role in that, and the DFE have confirmed that now. That brings us on to wider CPD, and we now refer to that in the system as the curriculum hubs. So there are curriculum hubs for maths, for phonics, for behaviour, for music, although the music ones are operating in quite a different way to the others, and also for science. So for my day job, I run 2 science learning partnerships, which are effectively science curriculum hubs. And that leads us on into the leadership programs with the NPQs, and that's what we're talking about this morning. So I just wanted to make sure before Liz started that everybody understood the background to the changes that have happened from this September. So from this September 22, the NPQ, the old National Professional Qualification for Middle Leadership, has been split into 4 different routes. So we've got these 4 different routes that are on the screen there. And, you know, heads are saying, well, if we want good middle leaders going on into senior leadership, actually, we need people to have more than one of these. So it's okay doing NPQ LTD if you were like I was when I used to be in a school sixth form, where I was dealing with the beginner teachers and the PGCE students, actually, Liz, that came from the IOE, you know. But if you're not doing that, if you're doing the leading teaching or you're doing the leading behaviour and behaviour management, actually, once you get to a senior leadership role, those roles and the line management of those roles tend to merge. So there's quite a lot of interesting conversations going on at the moment in the system, and I'll be interested in people's views on that later on in our conversation. And NPQEYL, if you haven't heard of it, the leading literacy is one of the new ones that was introduced, as I said, so these were all new. You can see where the antecedents of the others come from. Leading literacy is completely new. A lot of these, or in fact all of these NPQs, have an instructional coaching element to them. And instructional coaching is a hotly debated topic. In fact, the differences in mentoring and coaching are very hotly debated. And Chris, for example, has contributed to previous LPD RIG meetings where we talked about that. If you are watching this online, or if you're interested in this, we've got a previous LPD RIG session that Rachel Lofthouse contributed to from the work that's being done at Collective Ed. And I really would have a look at the Collective Ed resource bank if you're interested in the differences in mentoring and coaching and the different types of coaching and the way in which this is being rolled out on a national scale, as opposed to the sort of more humanistic roles that need to go on in schools, if I can refer to them in shorthand as that. So the changes from this September then are that we've had these 3 traditional senior leadership programs that have run for quite a long while. NPQEYL was introduced in 2016, 2017. And then from this September, we've got this new introduction of early years leadership, which is the focus for today. So I've just put a few references in there, including the link to Collective Ed in case you haven't got it. And I just wanted to do that really just to contextualize where we were at and what we were going to talk about today. Can you all see that screen? So Liz, can you just tell me whether or not you can move that screen forward yourself?
No, I don't think I can.
Okie dokie. Nick, if you can hear me, if you can make Liz a co-host, she can do that then. And I will send Liz a message and I will move them on while you're talking until you can do that yourself, Liz.
Okay, all right then. Well, as I said in the introductions, I'm really pleased to be here today. And I've got a series of slides here that I'd like to share with you. Saying that, I don't want to repeat things you already know. And what I am particularly interested in is the following discussion, especially as some of you have experience of the new NPQEYL yourselves. Okay, so next slide then.
You should be able to do that yourself now.
Oh.
She tells me that you are a co-host.
Oh.
If you just put your cursor on it, to click on it.
Right click, yeah?
Yeah.
Oh, I can't seem to be able to move it. Have I got something?
Right, she's listening in, so I'll get her to do that again. And in the meantime, I will carry on moving.
I'm so sorry, Deb. I'm clicking and also using the cursor and I can't seem to. How weird. I don't know if I've got something here. Okay, right. So, oops.
No, it doesn't look like it's working, does it?
No. Okay, so just a quotation to start with. So about good leaders changing organizations and great leaders changing people, and how people are at the heart of any organization. So if I go on to the next slide. So I want to talk today specifically about the new NPQEYL. And I think the main thing that we can see from this quotation here from the DFE is that it is fundamentally different in some ways from the other suite of NPQ leadership programs. So we need to consider the diversity of the early years sector. So our participants are from private, voluntary, independent nurseries, childminders, and actually, even though the DFE suggested in the guidance that reception teachers might be best suited to the other NPQs in leadership, we do have quite a high proportion of reception teachers who are participants within the NPQEYL programme. So I think we had about 250 participants who started in autumn, October last year. And we've got about 150 who are just about to start now March with our spring intake. So it's an 18-month programme in a similar way to the other NPQ leaderships. We take in 2 cohorts a year. I think what I wanted to also mention is that each programme is designed to address a different need within the early years sector within this early years education recovery programme. And so the NPQEYL is being rolled out as part of this whole initiative, recovery initiative. That is great, but it also does bring to some extent some challenges, because I'll talk a bit later more about this in terms of some challenges we've faced with there are a whole variety, a range of courses, development training that is on offer in the early years sector at the moment, and whether they have the capacity to engage with all those programs on offer for CBD is debatable. So just for the next slide, just to show the alignment with the NPQEYL with the rest of the leadership qualifications, something that is very specific is that our participants are at different entry levels, because some of them will have level 3 and above. So basically anyone can engage with the programme with level 3 and above, and they need to be aspiring to be or are leaders. So some of our participants are not actually in leadership roles, but aspiring to be leaders. So that obviously brings some issues, which I'll talk about a bit later on as well, in terms of making the programme accessible, considering the wealth, we've got the wonderful richness and the diversity of the sector, but then we've got people within that richness and diversity coming in at different entry levels and different levels of experience, and also different experience of different contexts, because we do have quite a few childminders who are participating within the programme. The next slide goes on to the actual golden thread. If we could go on to, that's it. This very much aligns with what Deb was saying at the beginning of our meeting. So the golden thread, as Deb has mentioned, aims to cohesively weave progressive CPD in advance of teacher and leadership skills. And this is very much a model that I think was developed with the school sector in mind. And some of our challenges arise from the fact that in many earlier settings, if they're not school-based, nurseries or reception classes, our participants aren't really engaged the same career structure or career path as school-based colleagues. And so that is something that we've had to bear in mind in terms of there's not necessarily that natural progression of obtaining an NPQ and then developing as a leader within your career advancement. So the next slide. This is content framework statement. So it's based upon the evidence about leadership in early years. It draws on the expert guidance from the statutory framework. It's independently assessed and endorsed by the Education Endowment Framework. So this content framework that we need to work with and within the NPQEYL, as Deb has already said, is already set, is already established. So we can have some flexibility as those partners with the DFE, but we cannot change particular statements or expectations in terms of the framework. So the framework, in a similar way to other NPQs, set out knowledge, skills and behaviours that need to be developed by teachers or practitioners when they participate in the programme. Our expert group from the NPQ Early Years Framework includes some sort of well-known names such as Dr. Julian Grenier from Sheringham Nursery School and Children's Centre, Professor Iram Sarraj from Oxford University, and also taken on board the Education Policy Institute and grassroots level input from nurseries and providers. So the next slide. I'm not going to talk through this in any way, but it's just to illustrate that we have to address every statement within the NPQ content framework for early years leadership. And when we start within our domains, we have a domain digest, which is like an outline of a particular area, a particular domain we have to address. Culture is one here as an example. And our domain digests have to include explicitly every statement regarding what participants should learn. They need to learn that and learn how to. So that is something that's already set that we need to work within. And equally, we have references from the next slide that we have to match within all our materials. Saying that, we can also bring in a lot of evidence-based research from IOE experts and some of our partners who have been working with us in terms of rolling out and developing and writing the materials for this programme. So there is some flexibility in then what we add to the materials we produce. So the next slide just identifies the aims that we've specifically identified from UCL as someone who's going to be rolling out the NPQEYL for the DFE. And what we really want to engage with is this evidence-based issue. And that's again somewhere where we're bringing in a lot of expertise, some flexibility, and trying to make the qualification as relevant as possible to those leaders who are actually at grassroots level in the field. And we've been fortunate that we've been able to draw upon not only the work from the EEF, which is designated by the DFE, but we've also been able to bring in a lot of research that's been done by, for example, my colleague Amanda Ince on facilitated action research. And that is something that runs through all 3 modules of the programme. So the next slide. So just to sort of remind of the eligibility criteria, which is different than the rest of the NPQ leaderships. So as you can see, they can be from managers, from PVIs, they can be head teachers and leaders of school-based and maintained nurseries. As I've said, we do have a considerable number of reception teachers or nursery teachers from school-based or maintained nurseries who are leaders in early years of that phase. Childminders with leadership responsibilities. So that's, as I said, we had 245 starting at the beginning of the rollout, slightly less participants now with the spring. So just going on to the actual content, And I won't spend too long on these slides. So basically we are, it's identified in the framework by the DFE that we have early years leadership domains that need to be addressed. And each of these domains, as I mentioned, has specific statements that we must adhere to and we cannot change. As I mentioned, implementation runs all the way through the 18 months. So we have divided all the other domains into 3 modules, but the implementation, even though it will be in module 1, is actually then almost developed as a action research project that goes across all 3 modules to the final part of the program. So the next slide. So just to show you that we had the flexibility to decide where we were going to address certain domains. So module 2 has only 2 domains in, because actually the framework is really extensive for those 2 domains with a lot of statements to cover. In a similar way to the other NPQs, we have the learning audits, we have face-to-face events, we have online learning, we have peer learning groups, we have specialist learning communities, work-based application and assessment. And in a similar way, the summative final assessment is provided by another organisation, although we are still involved in developing the formative assessment tasks that are there for each of the domains. Some of these things, and I'll talk a bit more about this in the challenges, some of these things have great opportunities for the early years sector when you think the diversity of it. So some of these events, especially when some of our delivery partners are able to set up face-to-face peer learning groups, they're organising learning walks, taking in turns to have these groups in different settings and bring together the whole diverse community of those participants as a community of learners. But it also brings challenges because early years practitioners, and it's interesting, Deb mentioned today about people who are in early years but actually are in settings, the actual organisation of their work pattern is very different in schools. They might not necessarily get release time. A lot of our practitioners are paid by the hour. They might not even have a working area with access to online resources in the sort of same way as schools. And a lot of their work we're finding, if they're in PVIs or non-school settings, their work is having to be done in their own time. And it's really interesting that, as I mentioned before, the take-up seems to be a higher proportion of reception teachers than was anticipated either by us or the DFE. So just on the next slide, I just wanted to mention that we've been working very, very closely with the British Association for Early Childhood Education. So we've been drawing upon the expertise of experts from the IOE, drawing upon contemporary research in early years, but we've also been working very closely with early education, and a lot of their experts have also been writing and developing materials in collaboration with us. We're not actually involved in the national delivery, and that is designated to teaching school hubs and local delivery partners. So just to mention, this has led to us at the initial stages of some research we're conducting, and this is where I was going to mention Suzanne as well, because we've got a question here, which is, how are policies for developing leadership in early years contributing to wider professional learning for professionalisation? And so we're working with Suzanne. We're looking specifically at reviewing the NPQEYL implementation and making some comparative analysis with the leadership program in the Swedish context. And we're hoping to have a view on offering lessons for future policies of professionalisation and professional learning. And it's primarily going to be through a review of literature through the lens of agency, curriculum and professionalisation. So we're hoping to really shed light on what activity we need to attend to thinking about institutional embeddedness of policy initiatives, especially when you bear in mind the specific diversity and complexity of the early years sector. So on the next slide, I've actually just outlined some of our initial thoughts, which have also been shared with the DFE in terms of our opportunities. So as I mentioned several times, the collaboration across the diverse sector, the community of learners, especially due to the diversity and sharing those experiences. You know, it's thinking about agency and values and professional interventives. It's actually providing CPD in a sector that has not previously had this sort of engagement with evidence and CPD in this way with the NPQ. We're hoping to raise status and provide much needed CPD for leaders and recognition. I think our opportunities for using evidence, using research is something that can feed into the action research that makes an impact basically to practice and children at grassroots levels. I think in terms of the challenges we're facing is the diversity of the sector means that some of the expectations need to find, I don't know, different ways of working them. For example, I think Deb mentioned about mentoring. A lot of our participants may not have line managers or someone who can mentor them in the same way as you might have in a school-based structure. For example, our childminders are saying to us, well, who's going to be my mentor? We're trying to lead them to colleagues who might be in the local childminding hub and finding different ways of addressing this. But there's certainly ways of, I think this qualification, the NPQ, has really brought a question about the way we're going to actually do things in a slightly different way. I think also the range of policy initiatives has impacted upon recruitment, particularly with our spring intake, because earlier settings being so specifically different in the way they work, they can't necessarily release people. And the DFE does not provide, even though they provide, the course doesn't have to be paid for as such as the NPQ, but the release time still has to be taken up the responsibility from the settings themselves. So I think there definitely are some issues. I also want to mention the accreditation, because the DFE has said the early years NPQ is not necessarily an accreditation, and because it actually doesn't feed into the career structure in the same way, then that brings another challenge. Within that, I just wanted to, I think this might be one of the final slides. I just wanted to talk about the fact that there is some research that we're feeding into now, which I think is just a fantastic opportunity. The research was already set up by UCL in collaboration with delivery partners. So we want lots of delivery partner input within this research. It's a longitudinal study, and it's thinking about the impact of NPQ programs on the work engagement, well-being and retention of school leaders. And we're really, really excited about the opportunity to actually now join from the NPQEYL academic team to that feed into the results of this study. And it is going to be a mixed methods study. Then I've just got some references next, I think, on the next slide. And the final slide gives some reference links, website links rather, if you want to follow up on anything I've said. So that's my presentation, and I'm really pleased to hear your thoughts about any of the topics I've talked about, and opportunities and challenges.
Impeccable timing when we said 11 o'clock. Really amazing. I'm very impressed indeed. And I do have an apology from Nick. She's not sure why the co-host thing didn't work, so we're going to go and check whether or not we've got multiple co-hosts, because it seemed to work, because a couple of times I didn't think I was moving them forward. I thought you were. So you did very well to keep going in adverse circumstances.
It may be something to do with yes from the rural wilds of Wiltshire. Perhaps something's up with my computer. I am in Elizabethan cottages, so yes. I don't know. The joy of technology.
The joy of technology, but you did very well keeping going. So that was great. Thank you. What we'll do, folks, is we'll do public questions. So questions for Liz, and then we'll have a quick break, turn our Zoom screen off, and then we can have a private conversation. And just saying to people who will replay this, if you want to join the private conversation, you need to log in and join us for the RIG. We really appreciate that that's not always possible, but it is nice for us to have some time to discuss things without it being recorded. So, public questions. I imagine Christian has already turned his mute off, and I imagine he has a question to go because he's done work in this area, I know. Christian, you? Oh no, put your mute back on now. That mean you don't have a question?
I have.
Yeah,
Can you hear
over
me?
to you. Yeah, I can hear you fine. Over to you.
Sorry. Liz, that was fantastic. That was very helpful. Fast trail through your program delivery and so on. What a challenge. My question to you is, how many of the first and second cohort are from minoritized groups, and how are you going to prepare them? How is the program going to specifically prepare them for leadership, either in the near future or later on? A little challenge for you.
It is, and yes, I love that. Start with a really challenging one. This is the honest question. I can't give you that data at the moment, but it is a really good question, and I will need to come back to you on that. I mean, I think it's an excellent point. I mean, obviously we are trying to bring that diversity, not just within the sector, but diversity in terms of our participants through within the design and the structure of the materials as best we can. So we're trying to make it as inclusive as possible. Obviously, we're not rolling out the delivery ourselves, but I will have to come back to you with the percentages there, because that's a really good question.
Can I just ask a subsequent question, please? Because related to that would be within the London Borough city, you have huge number of multicultural schools. How are you reaching out to that cohort of population? What's your marketing strategy, and how do you engage the mixed community? You know, the ones that are hard to get to, because you know, you've identified funding, release time, getting to your venues if that's the case, child minding issues, and so on and so forth.
I mean we're working closely with our delivery partners. We're trying to advertise in different ways, and I'll be quite honest, and I know this is a public discussion, and I think, you know, we have been working very closely with our marketing team as well to try and find different ways to reach those sort of, you know, forgotten voices really in that way. We're trying to advertise in early years. The Association for Early Years who we're working with, we've been setting up blogs, we've been trying to use the sort of non-traditional ways as well of marketing this program. But I'll be quite honest, this is something that has been quite challenging. And I think it's something as well that comes from the specific diversity of the settings. And it's been quite challenging. We've been trying to get lists. I mean, just getting lists of PBIs in itself, you know, is not as straightforward as contacting schools in the way you might do with the other NPQs. So I'm not sure I've fully answered what you're saying, but I think it's really, really.
I think the potential recruits will be asking, "What's in it for me?" And
yeah, absolutely.
How exactly will your cultural module develop me as a leader?
Yeah.
So, you know, you've got running across the whole module bands is the notion of leadership and preparation and the enactment of leadership. You know, so that needs unpacking. I'm sure you will do that. But I'm just thinking aloud. Sorry to be a pain.
No, not at all. And I mean, hopefully this is the sort of thing that will come out of the research we're doing as well, in terms of thinking about impact, but also with engagement as well. And you know, I do think, I mean, generally as well, because of the entry level difference, you know, and because of the career structure difference, I think it's a question that a lot of early years practitioners are asking in terms of why, if it's not an actual qualification, if it's not going to support career progression, obviously we want the best for the outcomes for children. And, you know, we have our participants are completely engaged and, you know, want to do the best for their setting, but there has to be something as well that is like, why should I be taking on this work? And in already a sector that's under huge pressure and does not have the sort of release time. So I do take your point. And it's something I will feed back to, I'll discuss with Amanda as well. And yes, perhaps if we join again, we can give you some more insight into it.
Thank you.
Anybody want to ask another public question before we finish our Zoom recording? Okay, so in which case, Nick, if we finish the recording there, that'd be great. Thanks for a really interesting presentation, Liz.
You're welcome.
Because we're 11:05, unless